Okay, this session is for doctors who are coaching or are supportive coaches. And what our focus will be on what happens when, because we all have fears about stuff stalling or having trouble with coaching. So what we're talking about now is the fact that these talking points are just meant to engage the doctor further should things stall. They'll help you move from the reaction and content stages into the coaching for commitment to change. And of course, as a reminder, and you can see the circles, and remember, this is an iterative model, so you may go back and forth, but you are building the relationship, exploring reactions and reflections, confirming content, and coaching for change and to co-create an action plan. So always think about when you get started, tell the doctor who you are, your credentials, the nature of your work, because you want to establish the role and also find out about the doctor's practice and interests. And that way you can draw on that as you go along. You will have reviewed the reports as well as the doctor having reviewed the reports, and you've jotted down some notes, and be sure to have them handy because you may want to and probably should draw on the strengths you've noted, and also have figured out 3 or 4 areas that you might identify for development. But sometimes things are funny. And we're not going to cover everything between Michael and I, but we'll cover a few of the things that we've found out. There is a sheet that is on the website, and you can draw on that for further cues and clues before you do coaching. So the first one is, what happens when the doctor's scores are exemplary? And, everybody is anxious about giving feedback to someone who seems to be really quite perfect. But remember, Olympic athletes, golfers, skiers all get feedback to tweak their practice. And so really push and encourage the physician to identify areas for improvement. Now, in some cases, this may mean going a bit beyond the report and the narrative and the numbers, and encouraging the physician to think about things that may make the office or the practice more effective and more efficient. Areas like research, extra teaching, new teaching, that committee work that the physician might want to engage in to enhance their commitment to medicine and their enjoyment of medicine and the practice of medicine. So, don't give up, and certainly don't think that just because scores are exemplary, there's no need for probing and encouraging, aiding and abetting. We've got another one on doctor scores suggesting deficiencies. We're not going to talk about that, as Michael will tell you from his hundreds of doctors that he's coached. It doesn't come up that often. I know that's a concern, but certainly one where we've got some ideas on the guideline sheet. Do you want to take this one?
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn. And just to reiterate that there are lots of common scenarios that do come up, and your notes to be able to describe some of these scenarios that we've put together. And just to, Jocelyn, the one about the exemplary, I often, because you will get a lot of doctors with good reports, I often ask them to describe what they do in a consultation that generates such good scores. So getting them to think about what they do well and to do more of it, and get them to describe that. It's often interesting. Sometimes you get a bit of silence and they're not quite sure what they do. But then once you can open up that discussion, we start exploring those exemplary scores and what they did well. And in this particular case, which it does happen, where the doctor wasn't prepared, when you ask them what reactions did they have to report, you might have a doctor say, I actually haven't read the report. And I think in that case, you could suggest that maybe this isn't the best time to discuss. That might be important for them to have a look at that report, and could we reschedule perhaps that meeting so that we can get the most out of the hour debrief. Otherwise, I think it would be, my experience is it's been difficult to get value when someone really hasn't picked up a report and had a look at it in the first instance.
It's rare, but occasionally there'll be a doctor who wants to focus on the positive without solutions for areas needing improvement. And again, what you're going to do is have your short list of items that the physician might address or think about, and you've gone across the data and looked at the narratives. And so you may have to be a bit more directive here. And this is similar to what happens when a physician resists making changes or suggesting a way forward.
When the doctor is angry, upset, that can be a little awkward. But I think this could be rich for learning, actually. And I had a recent example where a doctor was upset about their results, not so much the patient feedback, but the colleague feedback. And I just asked, you seem disappointed in what was being said. And because we built that rapport initially, and we spent some time, me listening to her, the particular event came up where she shared with me that she was feeling somewhat bullied in her work environment and not appreciated by one or two people in that particular clinical setting. And it became an opportunity just for her to vent those feelings, and it made sense too about some of the suggestions that were being put forth. And one of the suggestions that was quite strongly being put forth was to become more assertive. She found it very difficult to do that given the work environment, but also because of her cultural background. She said in her culture, it was seen as somewhat rude to be assertive. I guess that's how she saw it. So we just talked a little bit about what being assertive might mean in the context of her work environment. And that became a learning point. And I think most of the discussion around the multi-source feedback results, particularly the colleague feedback, because she did have a lot of positives from other colleagues, was how she might be able to tailor her assertiveness in a way that was true to herself. And she could, at the end of that, and it was lovely and surprising, she could see a way forward that she was going to put into practice, which encapsulated some of the feedback in the qualitative comments about being a bit more forthright and speaking up and not being too softly spoken. These were things that she wants to do, but just wasn't quite sure how. So she, I was able to point her in the direction of some, just general assertiveness training. You can Google assertiveness. We just talked briefly about what's the opposite to assertiveness. So it was very, very sort of high level conversation, but she had specific things she wanted to do some actions at the end of that particular debrief. So when a doctor is angry or upset, I think explore those feelings a bit with them and see where that gets you to, because there might be something there that comes out during that discussion. As I said in a previous session during these presentations, these are quite debriefing sessions. They're touching on the person themselves, you know, getting feedback on one's interpersonal competencies and one's professionalism is very personal, and it touches deeply sometimes. So therefore, the conversations can be very rich around purpose and around how they can become better in those areas. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Now, occasionally, a discussion will get sidetracked, and I think you have to weigh that as you go along. Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? As Michael described, the physician who was angry and upset, the R2C2 model is one in which you may have to swing back to making sure the relationship that you have with the doctor is working, and so that the doctor can talk about what's going on, and then proceed back to the reaction and content. So it is iterative and can go backwards and forwards. I mean, you will have told them at the beginning that your goal is to come up with 3 action plans. And so you do want to stay the course on that, but be flexible if you need to. Yes, this is when nothing is happening very well. And you're thinking, my goodness, now what? Well, I think sometimes you say, well, look, we've done 1 action plan, we've done 2. Our hour is up. I think we need to either come back or leave it at what you've got. Depends on your circumstances as the coach. And again, there's lots of resources on the website, and there's contact information. So I'd let you proceed with that and reviewing other resources.